ducklings, thank you for joining me for this video where I'm going to be talking about my opinions on the dreaded question of whether or not you can read your own cards. And I'm talking today about either tarot cards, if that's your thing, or oracle, if that's more your thing. And I know that there are loads of people who work with both. So I'm talking about basically cards. And you could actually extend this to any form of divination. Now that I'm thinking about it, I do actually think there's a high chance I have addressed this on my channel before, or I've addressed something in this area before, but it was a very long time ago, and I am not actually willing to take the time to even rewatch that video. It was so long ago that I'm just going to go in now fresh with my perceptions at the age I am now and being the reader that I am now, and let's just get into it again, even though there may have been a previous video. I think I've been on YouTube long enough now to accept that there are going to come times where I need to go over certain subjects again. I need to sort of like reiterate things, or indeed I've just learned a lot more and I have a lot more thoughts to offer on the subject. And I think that's going to be particularly true in this case. I definitely have opinions on this. I definitely think I've got things that I could suggest that would be helpful. Something that I want to get out of the way right off the bat is that it does tend to irritate me when people are very yay or nay and very prescriptive and very hard line about their answer to this question. Because usually what will happen is that if somebody feels that they cannot read the cards for themselves, then they are sometimes likely to hold the belief that other people can't read cards for themselves. And obviously that just isn't the case. Some people can and some people can't. Some people like to do it and think it's beneficial, and other people tend to find that it really restricts them from being able to use the cards well and take in the information well, and that they have too much bias, right? So there's definitely a spectrum, and some people read the cards for themselves in what they feel is a very fruitful way. They feel like the challenging messages come through. They do not feel that they struggle too much with their bias. And other people feel like, you know, it flat out no for them. They cannot read for themselves. They have to have another reader do it because they are too close to the subject, is usually how we say it. And I think both of them can be right, but I don't think that either of them are the right answer for everybody, obviously. So whenever we start to get really prescriptive or really hard line about the answer to that question, it just tends to irritate me, because there just can't be an answer that fits everybody. There's no blanket response to that includes everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own perspectives today, a little bit about what I think you can do if you want to read cards for yourself that will make it easier or give you kind of like a smoother ride and make the reading more beneficial. But I do want to say right out of the gate that if you are somebody who feels like you can't read the cards for yourself and it doesn't really seem to go right, and you don't get a good reading out of it, that's fine. You know, there are lots of people that feel that way. There are lots of pro tarot readers who feel that they cannot really read cards for themselves, or at least they don't do it very often. They're not called to do it very often. They want to bring another reader in, right? So you're not alone. You're not a failure. You don't have to worry about the fact that that is your perspective. But I think if you start trying to lay that perspective on thick with other people, that's where we kind of go into wonky territory, because some people can read very well for themselves. I think that my experience with this, my personal experience with this, mirrors the experience of a lot of other readers. And that is that there are some things that I can read for myself about, and there are some things that I just know that I can't read for myself about. And it is about really being honest with myself about that. It's about sitting with it, and sometimes I don't even need to sit with it. Sometimes I know right out of the gate that I need another reader if I want a reading around that topic. I just know that I'm very confused about it, or I'm very messed up about it, or I know that there is something that I'm not seeing, and there is a high risk or a sort of a likelihood that even with the cards out in front of me, there might be ways in which I am sabotaging my own understanding, or maybe I'm in denial of what it is that I need to see. So I just feel, you know, very strongly that it wouldn't be helpful for me to give myself a reading. Sometimes I need to reflect on it. Sometimes I might really want to draw cards for myself, but there might be something that stops me from doing it. And I might think, how productive is this going to be? Am I hanging on to biases that I have about the situation? Am I yet ready to challenge myself and do the work just with myself? Or would it be useful to get a perspective from the cards that comes from someone external, so that I know that I'm not keeping myself in my little comfort zone on the issue? Right? Other times I find that I'm completely fine reading for myself. I'm comfortable with it. I'm confident with it. I know that it's a topic that I can explore. and that the cards are going to give me benefit when I draw them for myself and journal on them myself and think about what the interpretation of the spread is myself. So I think, first of all, if you feel that you can't read for yourself on a certain subject, then it's likely that you can't read for yourself on that subject. You've already answered your own question. If you're feeling like you're not going to get a lot out of it, or you are going to miss messages that you may need, or you are going to be too linked into your own bias around the subject, then chances are that you are right in feeling that way. And if you want to have a card reading, it is best to go with somebody else for that card reading rather than doing it yourself. You may be able to revisit the subject at a different time and find that you can sling cards for yourself on it. But I think if you are feeling as though there are going to be blocks, there are going to be obstacles, then you're probably right, so just listen to yourself on that. Sometimes if we know that we're not being honest with ourselves and we're not getting to the heart of the matter, and we might be mollycoddling ourselves on something, or we might be in denial about something, we want a reading from somebody else because we know that somebody else might present us with information or insights or questions for us to answer that we wouldn't have gotten to on our own, because we're not in that place where we can be tough loving with ourselves. We're in that place where we probably might mollycoddle and we might sort of ignore key pieces of information that don't support our narrative that we want to protect and that we want to hold on to, right? So I think sometimes it's a bit of tough love for yourself to actually go to another reader and see what comes through from the cards on from another reader. It's almost like saying, let me take away the security blanket of my own bias and my own narrative, because I know that if I draw the cards now, I'm going to want to hang on to that, and actually I'm ready for those messages that maybe I wouldn't give myself but I would accept from another reader. One thing I will say though is that you do need to know that you are ready to accept tough messages from another reader. Sometimes if you're not ready to accept them reading your own cards, then you might not be ready to accept them in any case from anyone. So definitely be sure that you are ready for tarot to hit you between the eyes with some serious wisdom, some insights, some questions that might turn things on their head for you, because a lot of the time with any proficient reader, that is what tarot will do, and that is one of its functions, right? So you have to be sure you're ready in general. But anyway, back to the subject, which is reading for yourself as opposed to getting somebody else to read for you. So obviously the main reason that people feel they can't read for themselves is bias. Whilst it is true that sometimes your bias is too great for you to be able to see through it, I don't think that bias in itself always needs to stop you from reading your own cards. When it comes to reading the cards for yourself, main thing that I really believe is that bias works in the same way as shadow. And if you think about how we deal with the shadow, or how we deal with an aspect of our shadow, once we bring it into the light, acknowledge it, look at it in its fullness and say, yes, this exists. I don't want to put it in the shadows anymore. I want to bring it out. Then it begins to loosen its grip on us. We begin to be able to work with it in a way where it doesn't catch us off guard. It's not destructive anymore. We accept it about ourselves, and so it stops playing up and getting out of control. We have some handle on it. I think bias is very similar when we are wanting to read for ourselves. If we accept our bias right off the bat, then I think it can not only neutralize the harmful aspect of it, but I think it can also turn the bias into a strength. And I want to explain this in a little bit more depth. So one thing I will say is that when I read for people that I know very well, people like my mom or a close personal friend, right? Obviously I have an awareness, and they also have an awareness, that the reading I'm going to do for them is going to be very different from a reading that I'm going to do for someone that I've never read for in the past, who's given me 2 or 3 lines worth of notes about what they need for the reading. It's going to be different. We've spent countless hours in conversation with each other. So naturally, I have a very good idea of the topography of their psyche. I know what the deeper issues might be for them. I have a handle also on what other people in the equation around them are doing and saying, etc. So I have a lot of information that I cannot just put into a box and leave in another room. Okay, that information is in my brain. I can't stop it from being in my brain. So the best thing that we can both do to make sure that the reading goes as well as it can is to acknowledge the bias right off the bat. And I actually acknowledge it within the body of the reading. So when I'm doing the reading, not only am I looking for new insights, fresh information, things that they might not have thought of and things that we might not have discussed, but I'm also comfortable to say, for instance, when looking at a specific card, I might say something like, because of what I know about the situation, this is what I'm picking up from this card. I actually, comfortably say that it's because of my bias that I'm picking up a specific thing. It's because of the knowledge that I have that I'm looking at the card this way. And it doesn't mean that I won't also, look at messages differently and try and interpret in a way that might be surprising for me and surprising for them and kind of different to what we've already outlined. But if something is being confirmed for me that I already know because of my closeness to the querent, I'm just going to say that. I'm not going to pretend that I don't have that information. It's not a bad thing that I've got that information about them. I would far rather actually link it to what I do know and say to them, that conversation we were having the other day, well, I feel like this card links into that conversation. It is about being real about what you know. And also, once you are real about what you know and about where you're coming from with it, you can understand where you might be getting too comfortable with the interpretation of the cards that you have in front of you. So for me, rather than back away from doing readings for people that I closely know, what I would rather do is look at the spread and think, okay, I'm aware that I might have a bias as someone who loves this querent in front of me, knows a lot about their situation. So let me see if I can lean into this card more, because I might be reading it, jumping to a conclusion too quickly regarding it, or going with the bias that I know we may both have over it. So I start to then use it as a strength. I start to be like, okay, how much of this is confirming my version of the narrative or their version of the narrative that I know very well? And how can we go into territory that is a bit more challenging? I do this for myself as well. When I'm reading for myself, I do not feel that the reality of the fact that I've lost quite a bit of objectivity when I read for myself should stop me completely from reading for myself. I just feel that I need to be honest about it. I need to go in with that sense of honesty about it. No one can really know the inner workings of me and what I have been through and where I'm coming from better than me. And that could make the reading seriously juicy and useful and beneficial, but it also could be a block that stands in the way. But it's better for me to be aware of that potential for it to block me or to sabotage the usefulness of the reading, I think, than just to be like, oh, I've got to put a pin in it because I am me, so I couldn't possibly advise myself or challenge myself or use symbolism to help myself, So, but like I said at the beginning, and I want to just stress this again, I definitely have situations where I know that I'm not the best person to read for me. And that's when I'm really confused, or I keep coming back around to the same answer, but it's an answer that I'm questioning, or it's where I feel very, very adamant about something, but I'm wondering if that's coming from a place in my ego that's not helpful. And so maybe I want to get that outside perspective. In fact, I just purchased a reading from Regina, Sewell. I'll leave her channel link down below. She's amazing. And I purchased a reading from her recently because I know, and if she's watching this, then she will definitely know as well, that the thing that I need a reading about, I can't go there without that outside perspective. I'm just not going to be objective enough. It's something that I've been rolling around in my head like a bizarre ball bearing of annoyance. And I've called in another reader that I know is emotionally intelligent and I know is going to bring the wisdom to me that I need in that moment. And I'll be able to turn something over in my head that I didn't bake myself, because sometimes you're just not the right person. So I want to stress that again. It's not that I'm always in a good position to read my own cards, but I have done a lot of times, and I think that owning the lost objectivity, the percentage of objectivity that is lost there, is a good thing. It's better to just be like, okay, it's going to be different from somebody else reading for me, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be useful. I think a really good thing to do, darlings, if you want to read for yourself, is to ask yourself why. Why are you about to do the reading for yourself? Why do you want to shuffle cards and lay cards out in front of you and do a reading for yourself? What is the aim? And I think that if you are fuzzy on the aim, or if you quickly reach the conclusion that what you're looking for is just a confirmation of what you would like to be true, then I think you can back off on that. You can say, you know what, maybe not the right day to do this, maybe not the right time to do this. I'm definitely fuzzy on my aims, or I definitely think that my aim is just to further cement and confirm what I feel that I know. And so if I feel that I know it, what's the point in reading cards on it? What's the point? I'm obviously not open to being challenged or to seeing things in a different way. I'm not open to insights that may come up that do not support my narrative right now. And I think it's just about being honest about that. It's not about shaming yourself. It's just about saying, you know what, right now I'm turning things over in my mind, and I don't think I'm really looking to be challenged or to create strategy around something or to change anything or to really go deeply in a direction that is not the direction that I'm holding on to for the moment anyway. And you know what, the cards are going to be there in the next few days or in the next couple of weeks. So if you can't find a strong why, a really potent aim, then don't feel like you have to draw cards in that moment. So when we think about what the why could be for you reading for yourself, it could be that you just want a comforting message from spirit. You just want some encouragement. You just want some feelings of nurturing and reassurance. You don't necessarily want to be challenged or to create strategy around something. And I think that's fine. If that is the why, if the why is just, you know, to feel comforted, and you've got kind of like quite a high vibe deck that you really get on with, and you know that you get sort of warm, comforting, reassuring or strengthening messages from that deck, then that's enough. You do not always have to push in with this really strong desire to, you know, gain insight, challenge yourself, change your mind on something, or you know, be pushed into shadow work on something. That doesn't always have to be the aim at all. So you know, if you do feel like you just want some reassurance and you just want to feel held by the messages from the cards in that moment, then you know, I really I think that can be a why as well. It doesn't always have to be about challenging yourself and discovering what you might not be seeing. It might just be about feeling comforted. At this point in the video, I want to talk a little bit about reading for absent third parties. I know that there are some people that do this and there are some people that don't do this. So when it comes to establishing the why for your reading, if you are somebody who does read for absent third parties and you are wanting to know from the cards what somebody else feels in a situation or what somebody else is going to do in a situation, then I would simply advise you to ask yourself whether or not that is a good aim. Is that going to be helpful at this time? Is that a useful why? Okay, I'm not going to tell anybody that they can't read for absent third parties. People's beliefs on the cards are different, and I'm not gonna denigrate anybody's beliefs about what they do with the cards and what they don't do. Okay. For me, I don't read for absent third parties. And by that, I mean that I never sit down with the cards and say, what is he thinking? What is he feeling? What is he going to do? What does he think of me? That's basically where you're reading for an absent third party and you're using the cards to access information about them. Now, you may also, within the same reading, use the cards to access information about you and how you can heal or what you should do. But I think that for me, obviously, I can only really advise from the perspective of someone who only does that and only does that for her clients as well. I always want to make sure that it is querent centered and it's about what the querent can do, how the querent feels, how the querent can be empowered, because the other person or people that are involved are not coming to me for a reading. And so, you know, whatever I might advise is ultimately going to be less helpful to the querent if I'm talking about others than if I'm talking to the querent about the querent themselves. And that's how I feel. But if you are somebody who reads for absent third parties and you're wondering whether or not you should pick up the cards and just, for example, ask how is your boyfriend feeling about something, or how is your partner going to react to something, or whatever the case may be, then I'm not telling you that you're wrong for using the cards that way, but I'm saying you can still afford to ask yourself if that is a good why and if that is a good focus area. What is going to be useful for you in that moment from that? And then, of course, you know, do you feel that you will be able to be objective enough? Because we all have to lean into that whenever we read for ourselves. You know, we have to figure out, is this one of those readings that I can't really do for myself, or is this one of those that I feel is going to be beneficial? The next thing that I would advise, chickens, is that you can design a spread with your bias and your lost objectivity in mind. So if you are worried about how useful it's going to be to read for yourself on a subject, don't forget that within the spread design that you create, you can actually include spread positions that will help you to acknowledge that you might have a bias, or you might have a, you know, a psycho-spiritual blind spot with something, and you can use those spread positions to try and get out of your own way. So for example, one of the spread positions could be something like, where am I being biased in this situation? Whereabouts am I only seeing something from my point of view? You might also have another spread position, what could I be avoiding in this situation? What am I not seeing that it might be useful for me to now accept or examine? If you want to get a really good, effective reading for yourself, I would definitely recommend choosing your moment, choose the time. Have you been working really hard all day? You have very little patience, very little energy. Maybe you've got an empty stomach. Maybe you haven't had dinner yet. Maybe that might not be the best time to be able to read for yourself in a healthy and accurate manner. If you are still going through incredibly sort of whirlwind, overwhelming emotions about something, for a lot of people, they might feel like that's not the right time for them to consult the cards because they will be too clouded with what they're going through emotionally. That's not the opinion of everybody. That's not the consensus of everybody. But personally, I wouldn't lay out cards when I was really, really fucking angry, or when I was absolutely devastated and I just received difficult news. I would wait. I would process my emotions before I then consulted the cards on something. You might want to have some prep time beforehand where you just get really clear about your aim. You get really clear about why you want to do this reading, what you are looking for from it, and you're realistic about what you may not be able to get from it. And also you might want some time afterwards to journal about you know, the reading, get straight in your head what the takeaways were from the reading. So maybe you want to pick a time where you're not going to be rushing off somewhere straight after you've done the reading, although of course it's good to come back to the cards and reflect in a few days or in even a month. I know that lots of people revisit readings that they've had so that they can get little bits and takeaways from the reading with the benefit of distance and perhaps more objectivity or less intense emotion that they couldn't pick up when they actually initially had the reading. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Choose the right format for readings for yourself. One thing that I've learned that's really good for me when I do readings for myself, and I don't always do it, sometimes I just, you know, I might do a 3-card reading with 3 spread positions and I might just write out a few notes for what I feel the card interpretation is. But if I'm doing a big reading, if I'm doing anything that's over kind of like 6 cards, so 6 cards, 8 cards, 10 cards, I will film it for myself and actually watch the video back, and I will talk to myself as though I'm talking to a querent, as though I'm talking to another person, and I'll watch it back as though I'm watching something that's been sent to me by a reader, which of course it is something that's been sent to me by a reader, but it was something I sent to myself. That is a really useful format for me, and I never really thought about doing that before a fellow reader of mine said that that is how she processes the readings that she does for herself. So if you want to voice record yourself speaking your reading, video your reading, anything like that that is different from the usual thing that I think we do, which is where we jot down a few notes or we journal on the cards as we go, then you might find that that is more helpful. You might find that it's an easier way for it to go in, is if you actually have a recording, either visual or audio, to refer back to, as opposed to journaling it all out at the time. Make sure that you choose the deck that is going to be helpful for you if you have figured out that you want to read for yourself on something. Do you need a challenging deck? Do you need a deck that you feel is more connected to shadow work for you? Do you need a deck that is familiar, that is comforting, that is warm? There's no shame in that, and I want to really stress that. That's another thing that I get a little perturbed about when we have these discussions in the Cardslinger community about not using fuzzy wuzzy comforting decks. It's like they serve a purpose as well. You know, when you know you need that, you know you need that. You don't always want super harsh shadow medicine. That's not always what you're looking for, and that's fine. So choose the deck that is going to be right for the purposes that you've chosen to do a reading for. And if you want to combine decks, feel free. Who's standing over your shoulder saying that you can't do that? I like to combine tarot and oracle quite a lot, actually. I don't like to combine different tarot decks so much, but I do like to combine tarot and oracle in the same spread. Don't forget that just like the readings that you receive from others, not everything immediately makes sense all of the time. You might find that it's a bit higgledy-piggledy, you got a few things out of it, but nothing really struck you overly, and you might feel a bit disappointed. that's not necessarily because you read for yourself. Let's face it, I think some readings don't hit the nail on the head immediately when we get them from others. So we have to accept that there is a chance that that might happen with readings we do for ourselves as well. And I think the best thing to do is just to set the cards aside and come back to them. Either that, or you can accept that you got what you could from it, and at that exact moment in time you feel that that's what you were supposed to get from it, and kind of move on. Revisiting a reading later, I think, revisiting a reading after a few days or a couple of weeks, things can start to make a lot more sense. And there was even a reading that I received once that had something in it that I didn't understand, and it wasn't strictly related to what I had requested the reading for. And I also felt a bit defensive about it. I got my heckles up about it. And then it came very, very much true later down the line. And when I was rewatching that reading, or even before I rewatched it, I remembered it and I was like, oh my God, like, that really was a thing that ended up being the case that I really needed to examine. So that's interesting. So darlings, those have been my opinions and my tips on how to read tarot for yourself. Can you read tarot or oracle for yourself? Obviously this can extend into other methods of divination as well. I hope it was helpful. I would love to get your comments down below about whether or not you read for yourself. Do you divine for yourself? Do you help yourself in this way? Or do you tend to find that you can't do that and you prefer to have readings from others? Yeah, tell us about your stories, your perspectives, your journey on this, and I'll catch you in the comments section. Much love and blessed be.